If you've clicked this video, you're either into UI design or want to learn Figma just as a design tool. I'm gonna say one thing: stop with the overthinking and start right now, because Figma is the industry standard. Every UI UX job, every UI UX project, you're gonna need Figma. Unlike other tutorials, this isn't just the basic stuff. This is the premium stuff. Actually, it was supposed to be a complete paid course, but then I said maybe this will make you subscribe my channel, but I never learned. Well, we'll be designing a real mobile app in this course, and I'll teach you how to be a pro Figma designer even if you haven't touched Figma before. Grab your coffee, put down that phone, and let's dive in. To get access to Figma, go to figma.com. Here, you can explore what Figma is all about. Click pricing to check out the pricing plans. The great thing about Figma is that it offers quite a lot of free features in its free starter plan. And if you want some advanced features, you can sign up to their other plans like Professional, Organization, and Enterprise. By the way, if you are enrolled as a student in any capacity, you can get a professional plan for free. Thank you, Figma, for supporting students. Anyways, if you are just learning, this free starter plan is going to be enough. Just click the plan to register. It will ask you for your email address. I'm gonna just continue using my Gmail account. Then it is going to ask you some simple onboarding questions. Let's enter our name and continue. The work we do is design, so select that and continue. Here you can describe your work. I'm just gonna select freelance and continue. Who do we collaborate with? Currently, I'm going to say nobody and continue. If you want to add collaborators, you can add their emails. For now, we are going to skip this. Here, I'm just gonna select just checking things out and continue. Have you used Figma before? I'm going to say no because, well, it's our first time. Continue. Once again, select the free starter plan. And finally, what would we like to do first? You can choose between 3 different Figma products like Figma design file, FigJam, or Figma slides, and it will open that product for you. But we are going to skip this because we want to learn everything from the basics. After the registration, it will take you to this page. This is Figma Dashboard. Let's see what we've got here. On the top left, we have our account. Click here to change theme to dark or light. I'm going to keep it light. You can explore settings in here and also get a desktop app. Figma is also available in the browser, but it's also available to download as an app for Windows and Mac. I actually prefer the app, but for learning, I'm just going to use it on the web. It is basically the same app. Next up, in here you can create themes if you have many different themes in your organization, but you don't have to worry about it right now. In our team, we have a draft section. This is where our all files live if they are just in draft stage and not part of any specific project. You can see Figma has already created 2 files for us to help us learn Figma, but I'm teaching you, so ignore them. Next, we have all projects. Think of them as folders for your Figma files. For free, you can have only one project which has already been created for you, but that doesn't mean you cannot create unlimited files. It's kind of confusing, but it is what it is. Let's right click on this to rename it, and let's call this My Project. Double click to go inside the project, and inside the project, you can create unlimited Figma files. We can move draft file in here as well. So let's go to draft, right click on this file and click move file and select the project you want to move it to. Click move. Moving files to project has some benefits like sharing and publishing to a team library. We will talk about them later. Now, if you go into My Projects folder, we will see our design file in here. Finally, in the left panel, we have Explore Community option. Now, this is something amazing. Figma has a very active community of designers who create and publish their work in Figma community. A lot of it is free, but it can be paid as well. Instead of just design, there are Figma plugins in the community that will help you design faster and do things that even Figma can't do natively. Figma community is a great place to look for assets. So for example, if we search for something like food delivery, it will give us the results for all these Figma projects that we can use for free. We can even filter them out from here. Click on the file you want, and here you will see the Open in Figma option, which will basically copy the design into your draft as your own copy. Right here, you can see the preview of the file before you open it in Figma. We will explore these later as we want to learn everything from scratch. So let's go back. We are currently in our My Projects folder, and here we see this option to create a new file. Click it, and here we can see we have three options. We have a design file, which is used for creating UI designs. We have a Figma, which is more like a whiteboarding tool, and a slide deck for creating PowerPoint slides. In this tutorial, we are going to learn Figma as a UI tool. So we choose a design file. It will create and open a new design file for you. This is the actual tool and where all the magic happens. To go back to the files, click this little F icon and click back to files. And we can see we have our design file here by the name Untitled. You can rename it from here, but let's do it inside the file itself. So double click on it to open it again, and then just double click on the title here to change the name. Let's call this tutorial. I do have some assets for you in the description of this video, completely free, that we're going to use while we learn. Don't worry about them right now because I will tell you when to get them. There's also a link to a keyboard shortcut cheat sheet in the description of this video. That is definitely handy if you're a beginner. Now, let's begin. Figma design file is divided into 4 parts. On the left, we have our project panel. On the right, we have our properties panel, which is also called inspect panel. And in the middle, we have our infinite canvas, where everything we design will appear. And down here, we have our toolbar. Let's look at the project panel first. In the project panel, we have a file and an asset tab. We will explore assets later. First, let's check out the file. In file, you have 2 sections. Pages, where you can create multiple pages. In free plan, you can create 3 pages. Pages are just for us to organize things better. We currently have only 1 page. We can click this little plus icon to create another page and double click on the page to rename the page. So if we wanted to organize our design into 2 pages, we could call them mobile app and desktop app, like so. For now, let's just delete this one. In File tab, there is a Layers section. If you have used any design software like Photoshop or Illustrator before, you know what layers are. If not, don't worry about it, as we will discuss this in detail. For now, just know whatever we design will show up as layers in here. If we go in the Assets tab, we will have components and any design libraries that we are going to be using. By default, it has included these 3 popular libraries from Apple, Google, and Figma itself. You don't have to worry about design libraries as a beginner, and it's something that is not available for free, so we can just get rid of them for now. To add or remove a library, click this little book icon and just remove these 3 libraries. You can create your own library from this file and publish so that you can use this in your other project files, but it's only available in paid plans. So for now, let's just close this. Next, in our properties panel, we have design and prototype view. We will learn all about prototyping later in this video, so for now, let's see design view. In the design view, you will have properties of any element you select. But right now, we don't have any element in our canvas, so it's just showing the properties of the project itself. We have the page background color here, and we have some options that we will explore later in this video. In the toolbar, we have all these tools that we will use to create our design. So let's do it then. By default, we have our Move tool selected. Right next to it, we have our Frame tool. You can select it right from here by clicking on it, or just use the keyboard shortcut F. Once selected, just click and drag on the canvas to draw a frame of any size you want. We can see the dimensions of the frame while we drag in blue. Let go and it will just create your first frame. Frame might look like a rectangle. It is very essential to understand that frame is not just a rectangle, it's more like a container in which everything goes. In Figma, all the UI designs are created using frames. You can use this Move tool to move this frame anywhere on the canvas, just like this. You can also resize this frame to any size you want from here. Notice on the left side in the layers, now we have a new layer that says frame, and this little icon shows us that this layer is in fact a frame. Let's delete this for now. To delete a frame, just select it and press delete key on your keyboard or backspace if you're using a Mac. Now imagine if I wanted to design a web app. I need a frame for a size of any particular phone, but I just don't know the exact dimensions. Well, if you select the frame tool, you can look at some presets with exact dimensions for different phones, tablets, and desktops. Let's go with the iPhone 16 frame, and boom, we have our frame ready. But I don't like the name, so I can rename this frame from the layers panel just like this, or double click on the frame name and change it. Let's learn how to navigate the canvas area. Remember, I told you we can move this frame anywhere on the canvas using our Move tool like this. What if I move it somewhere around here? I don't see it completely now. Well, you can zoom in and zoom out of the canvas. right from here. You can also use the shortcut keys, Command plus to zoom in and Command minus to zoom out. Let's try it. Command minus and it zooms out, and Command plus, it zooms in. Perfect. To zoom it to the exact frame, we can use this zoom to fit option, or you just use the keyboard shortcut Shift 1, just like this. There are smarter ways to zoom in and out as well. For example, if you are using a laptop trackpad, pinch in and pinch out on your trackpad to zoom in and zoom out. And if you are using a mouse, hold down the Command key on your keyboard and use mouse wheel to scroll in and out with ease. I love this because it zooms exactly where my mouse cursor is. We can also pan around the canvas. To pan around, you can use this hand tool inside the toolbar and just click and drag to pan around. Or easier way is just to press and hold the spacebar on your keyboard to automatically select the hand tool. This is exactly how I use it. Hold the Command key on your keyboard and use mouse wheel to zoom in and zoom out. Then hold spacebar on your keyboard and just click and drag to pan around the canvas. Once again, hold the Command key on your keyboard and use mouse wheel to zoom in and zoom out. Then hold spacebar on your keyboard and just click and drag to pan around the canvas. While anything is selected on the canvas, in our case we have our frame selected, we can see all the properties of this frame in the properties panel. We have all our positioning values. We can control dimensions from here. You can type in any input or just hover on this till you see this little drag icon and just click and drag on left and right to decrease or increase the value. We also have some appearance properties like opacity and corner radius. We have our fill properties. We have our stroke. Let's actually start learning all of them step by step with an actual example of UI design. Now I want you to download the supporting files that I have linked in the description of this video, and I will give you a few seconds to download that. Once downloaded, unzip and you will find these files inside it. In Figma, click this F icon and go back to the files and click import file right from here. Then click import from computer. Now go into the folder that you just downloaded and select this reference Figma file. Once imported, click here to open it into a new tab. This is the Figma file that I created to learn all the core principles of Figma step by step. In this file, I have created 4 screen designs, pretty basic stuff like splash screen, login, home, and a category page. It is a design for a burger food chain app called Burgerlicious. Now, these are just 4 screens, but in an actual project, we could have hundreds of screens. But to learn Figma, these 4 will do just fine. On the left, we can see we have 2 pages, a screen page and a component page. In the components page, we have all the building blocks that make up the 4 screens that we just saw. Don't worry about these for now because we will come back to them when we explore components. Let's get back to the screens page. Believe me, the best way to learn is with an example. So we are going to replicate this design from scratch and learn all the key concepts while designing. And I want you to follow along with me. You can look at this file for reference, but don't just copy paste things because that would defeat the whole purpose. So let's get back to our previous tab and open our tutorials file again. First thing first, we need to bring in the logo. To import an image, go to the toolbar. Inside the shape tools, we have an option to import the image. We can of course use the keyboard shortcut key for this as well, which is Command Shift K. It will ask you to select the file, go inside the logo folder in the downloaded files and select this logo file. Once selected, Figma will show you this mouse cursor with an image. To place the image, just click and drag the mouse wherever you want the image. Hold the Shift key while dragging so it remains proportional and does not cut off at the sides. And let go to place the image. Now just use the move tool to drag it wherever you want. You can also resize it again if you want. And while you drag, you can see these red guidelines to help you align the items easily. You can also use these alignment options to align the item to its parent frame. Beautiful. It looks great. Next, we want our tagline text. To add a text, simply select this text tool from the toolbar or press the keyboard shortcut T. Now, if you need multiple line text, you could click and drag to draw a text area where you want it and just type in the text. For now, we just need one line text. So let's delete this and select the text tool by pressing the T on the keyboard and just click here and start typing. I'm going to paste in our tagline here. Now I can just align it in the center using these alignment options. Now, if we select this text, you can see in the properties panel, we have typography options available where you can select different fonts, change font weight, change font size, control the line height, and more, just like how you would do in any other word-based application. In this fill section, you can choose a color for your text, just like this. You can also set the fill to a gradient gradient or maybe an image or a video. For now, let's keep it a solid color. It's time we talk about local styles. So let's get back to our reference file for a second. Now, if you don't have anything selected in here, you can see in the properties panel, we have a few styles under the local styles. These are the styles that are being used in all of these screens. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, when designing a UI, we must decide what our colors are going to be, what is our brand color, what will be our text color, what will be the color of a text on a darker background. Similarly, we also define what our typography will be, what will be the font we use, what will be the body font size, what will be the heading size, all that. In this file, if you look above these screens, you can see I have already decided what our colors and typography is going to be. For example, our text primary color is going to be this color right here, and our brand color is going to be this orange color. But what if in the future I decide that this orange is not working for me and I would prefer some other color? And imagine if we have hundreds of frames, would I just change the color on every text? That would be crazy. So to fix this, we have something that we call local styles and variables. In our reference file, we can see we have created these local styles. And if I change this brand color style of orange to something else, it would automatically update in all the screens. See, as I am changing this color and it is being updated everywhere, we are using our brand color. And this is the power of local styles. Same concept goes for the text styles as well. If you're still confused, let me show you how this works. Let's go back to our file and create some local styles from scratch. In our file, deselect everything and you will find this option for local styles. Just press this plus icon to create a new style. And here we can see we have a few options: text, color, effect, and grid. Let's create a color style for now. Here you can enter any name for the style. I'm going to name it text primary because we are going to use this as our primary text color. And here you can describe what this is going to be used for. This is optional, by the way, so you can skip it if you want. And here you can select the color of your choice. I'm going to use this dark gray color and hit create style. And there you go. We have our first local color style created. Let's select this text. Now, as I showed you earlier, we could go in the fill properties and give it the same dark color right from here, but we will face a big problem if in the future we need to decide we need our color to be something red or something like that. So instead of giving it a direct fill color, just click this little icon for styles and variable, and in here you will see your color style that you just created, and just click it and it gets applied to the text. Now, before we see it in action, let's actually create a text style. Go to the local styles, create a text style, give it the name. Let's call this body MD. Choose the font. I'm going to keep it Inter. Font weight, I'm going to choose it to be medium. And for the font size, I'm going to select 16px. And this is the font style that I will use for my base body text across all the screens. You can control more properties from here, but for now, let's just click here to create it. Now our text style is created. Now we just need to apply it. So let's select the text, and in the typography, we have this style and variable option. Click it and just select the style that you just created. There you go. Our text style is applied. Let's align it in the middle and move it down slightly. Now let's see why we did all this. I'm just going to duplicate this text a bunch of times just to demonstrate. By the way, to duplicate anything, just hold down the Option key on your keyboard and just drag the item that you want to duplicate. If you select any of these texts, you can see that we have the color and text style applied. Of course it is, because we just duplicated it. Let's just remove the style from one of them. To remove a style, simply click this unlink icon next to the style to remove it. Now the color style is removed. Let's remove the text style as well. To remove the text style, again in the typography text style, press this unlink option and it will be removed. Now let's go change our styles. I'm going to deselect everything. In the local styles, next to the color style, I have this option to modify it. I'm going to change it to something like red. Notice how all the texts are now red except for the one that we removed the text style from. Similarly, if I go in the text style and modify it, it gets updated everywhere except for the one that we removed it from. Now you understand why we use our local style. It is very important to create local styles in the beginning of the project so that you can control everything globally easily. There are grid and effect styles as well that we will explore later. Let's undo and get rid of these because we don't need them. Now I'm gonna create the rest of the styles and we will use those in our project moving forward. There you have it. We have all our local styles ready. We will use these styles for everything that we create, which means if I select this frame, it had initially a white background directly applied to it. So let's switch it to the color style. This time I'm going to choose BG primary that I created, which is also white, so it won't change anything visually, but it will apply the style. Perfect. Now we have the logo and the tagline in place. Next we need is a button. To add a button, we always use a frame. So select a frame, draw a frame. Let's give it about 300 width and 52 height. To give it a color, let's go into the fill and select our brand color style from the color styles that we created. Give it a corner radius of 12 to make the corners rounded. Now we need a text, so select a text tool and click inside the frame. Type in the text. Notice that this text is inside this frame. In other words, it's the child of this parent frame. Let's rename this parent frame. Double click it to rename and let's call it button. We need to align this text in the middle. First, let's select the text. If something is inside a frame, press and hold Command key on your keyboard to directly select anything inside the frame. Or you can also directly select the layer from the left panel. Now, if I align it, it's going to align with respect to its parent. Let's give it a color and select text on color. And for type, it's already set to body MD, which is exactly what we want. And there you have it, our button is ready. Now I just need to place it over here at the bottom, and I need exactly 20 px space on both of its sides. Well, when I try to resize it, and by the way, this is a cool trick to resize from both sides simultaneously, hold down the Option key on your keyboard while you resize. But it's not showing me how much space we have on both of its sides. One of the things that I can do is I can stop resizing, and while I have this button selected, I hold down the Option key on my keyboard and hover on the outside frame to see the distance that I have from this. As you can see, but it's very hard as I will have to resize, stop, check the distance again, and again resize it. It's very messy. There should be a better way. Don't you agree? Well, there is. In Figma, we can create layout grids to help us align items perfectly. Let me explain. If we select this frame, I have this option here for layout grid. Click this plus icon to add a layout grid. It will add a grid of 10 px by default. We can change the size of the grid right from here in the options, and we can change the color of the grid as well. We can change the layout grid type to columns or rows. Let's select columns. We can control the number of columns from here, and we can also control margins around the 4 columns, and space between these columns is called gutter. See, as I change the gutter, the space between the columns changes. Let's say we need 20 px margin on both sides, and we need a gutter of 16 px. Now when I move this button, it will automatically snap to these columns, and now I can resize it and it will have 20 px margins on both sides. These layout grids are just guidelines to help you align items. These will not be actual part of the design in the preview. To preview a frame, have that frame selected and just click display icon, and here is the preview of your frame that you selected. We will talk more about preview properties later, but you can see that we don't see any layout grids here. Let's go back to our file. Now, if these layout grids are too distracting, you can always hide them. To hide them, select the frame. In the layout grid option, you can use this eye icon to toggle it on or off for this frame. Or if you want to disable grids for all of the frames in your design file, just go and click this F icon in the views, just unselect this layout grid option, or just use the keyboard shortcut Shift plus G on your keyboard, and it will hide all the layout grids. Let's keep it hidden for now. Now everything looks great. Let's try and create another button. Well, I can try and create a button from scratch by creating a frame and then adding a text, but let's just duplicate this one and modify it. To duplicate this button, hold down the Option key on your keyboard and just click and drag. Let's place it above this one right here. Now let's modify this button. First, let's change the text color. As I told you before, to select any item within a frame, you can directly select from the layers, or you can double click on the frame and you will be able to select anything within a frame. But much faster way is just to hold down the Command key on your keyboard and just hover over the item that you want to select and just click it and it will get selected. Let's change the color to text primary. For type style, it's already set. Let's change the text, double click the text to edit, and let's type in sign in. Let's align this in the middle. While we're here, let's just make sure that text is center aligned as well. So whenever to change it, it always remains in the middle. For the background, I don't want any background color. I just want it to be an outline button. So let's go to fill and just remove it right from here. In the stroke properties, we can click this little plus icon to add an outline. But again, we don't want to add any direct colors. We want to use our local styles. So let's get rid of this and click the styles and variable options and select this border primary local style. And there you have it. We have our beautiful outline button ready. By the way, while we are editing, you might ask yourself, how do you move things together? Well, there are plenty of ways. You could click and drag to select the objects that you want to move and just drag them around. You can also hold down Shift key on your keyboard and make multiple selections and move them together. But I don't want to do this every time, so I can group things together by selecting items that I want to group. Right click and click Group Selection. You can use the shortcut key Command G as well. See, this is now our group in the layers, and this dotted square tells you that it's a group. Now you can move it together as a group. To ungroup things, you can just press Shift plus Command plus G on your keyboard. Now it's ungrouped. And while we're talking about groups, you could also put multiple things inside a frame by right-clicking and clicking Frame Selection, just like this. See, it's a frame now. You can move it together, and let's call this one Logo Title. The difference between a group and a frame is that a frame is like a container with layout properties, and a group is just used to group items together so that we can move them together. More on that later. Amazing. Let's go to our reference file. Now we are going to design this screen. Now let's go back to our file and create another similar frame. I can use the frame tool and choose the same frame size as iPhone 16. Just drag and place it next to it. But there is a faster way. This is rather a new feature in Figma. Let's delete this frame. To create a similar frame, select the frame tool by pressing F on your keyboard and hover on this frame. You will see these two dots in both sides. Hover on them and you will see the option to add a frame. Now if you just click on this, it will create a duplicate frame, but we need an empty frame. So we can hold down the Option key on our keyboard and then click this plus icon, and it will create an empty same sized frame next to it. It's a very nifty little trick for you guys to learn. Let's change the fill for this container to our local style. Now let's bring in the logo without the text. I have that logo in the assets that you downloaded earlier. So let's import that. Remember how we uploaded images in the shape tools? Click this option here. Just go to the logo folder and select this logo file here. Now click and drag to draw this image. For easier alignment, I'm going to add a layout grid in this frame. Remember we created one for this frame earlier. It is currently hidden, so let's turn it on using the keyboard shortcut Shift G. I want the same layout grid, so select this frame and in the properties from the layout grid, just click over here and press Command C to copy it. Now let's just select the second frame and press Command V to paste. This works, but again, I don't want to do that every time I need to put it on a frame. Plus, if I later decide to change the margins on this grid, you will probably have to do it everywhere else. So what we can do is we can create a local style of this grid. Now, yes, I can create a local style from here and choose grid. But if you have some color, text property, or an effect, or even a layout grid already set, you can make it into a local styles. To do that, just click this little icon next to layout grids and then click this plus icon. And you can do that for any other local style. Now, if I reveal the properties here, we can see we already have some properties set. We just have to name it. Let's call it for call. And there, our grid local style is ready. Let's just now select this frame here and apply it just like any other style we apply. Now just drag and center align this logo up here. Let's add a text again. Press T to select the text tool and click to add a text. Let's type in sign in. I want this text to be a bigger text size, and we have already created a text style for it. So let's apply it from here. I'm going to choose the heading medium style that we created earlier. And for the color, I'm going to use text primary style. Let's align it over here. For the subtext, I'm going to duplicate this, change the text to sign in into your account via email, and change the color from text primary to text secondary, and change the size to body LG. See, that is why we create styles. It makes things so much easier. Let's put this under this text here with a nice margin between them. Great. Now it's time we create input field for email and password. To create an input field, we are going to use the frame tool. Press F to select the frame tool and click and drag to draw a frame. Give it fill from our styles, PG secondary. And I also want to give it a subtle border so it differentiates nicely from the background. So let's set the stroke color to border primary. Now let's set the height of the frame to 52px and let's resize it to fit the size of our layout grid. Let's hide the grid for now as it's too distracting. Shift G and it's off. Now add a text, press T, click and type in, enter your email. Oops, it's too big. Set the text style to BodyMD and color to text secondary. Let's drag it inside our frame. Figma will highlight the frame to tell you that it is in the frame now. Let's actually rename it to input field. Now all we need is an icon that will go here. To design graphical items like patterns or icons, we can use different shapes. We have a bunch of shapes in the shape tools here. For example, rectangle, lines, arrows, ellipses, polygons, and stars. To use the shapes, just select the shape and just click and drag to draw. These shapes have similar properties that you can control, but some shapes like polygons and stars have some extra options that you can change to create different kinds of shapes like octagon or pentagon. We can use these shapes together to make different icons or patterns. For example, if I needed an email icon, I would use this rectangle like this and place a triangle on top of the rectangle like this and rotate it. By the way, to rotate, just hover on the corner till you see this rotation option and just click and drag to rotate. Let's give them both a stroke and put these together inside a frame. Right click, select frame selection. Now I can move them together and we have our icon ready. For more complex shapes like curves, you can use this pen tool. Just select it and click anywhere to add a point. Click, hold and drag to add a curved point. You see this pen option here? You can use this to make the points curved as well. You can use these curves handle to adjust the angle of the curves. So this tool is great. This tool can help you create more unique and custom shapes. I'm not going to teach you the pen tool here because we rarely use this, but it's good to know that you can use this tool to create custom shapes. Anyways, making all the icons from scratch for every little things could take a lot of time. There must be a better way, right? Well, there is. Plugins. Plugins are like small tools to make your designing process easier and do stuff that even Figma can't do natively. To use plugins, click on this little weird icon that says action. You will find a bunch of these options here. We will come to those later, but for now, go to plugins and widgets option here. In here, you can look up thousands of plugins from Figma community. For example, if I need icons, I can search for it. As you can see, we have many plugins to choose from. I recommend a plugin called Remix for icons. This is the largest library of icons and it's 100% free. So let's search Remix, click to run. Now just search for the icon that you want. Let's search for email and there you have it. We have outline and filled icons and different variations. Let's use this one. Just drag and drop and we have our icon. Let's close this for now. I'm going to drag and drop it inside our input frame here. We can control the size of the icon from here, but for now the size works. Let's just change the color to text secondary, but you see the fill is hidden. That's because it's a frame. The actual shape is inside the frame. So you can either select the shape inside and change the fill from here, or you can select the frame and you will see these selection colors, which basically tells you all the colors being used inside a frame. Currently, it's only one color, so we can change it to our local style text secondary. We have our beautiful little input field ready. Now we need a password field. So let's just duplicate this one and let's put it under here. Change the text to enter your password and let's bring in the password icon. Again, go to the plugins, select the remixed plugin, search lock, and let's use this one. Now I could delete this email icon and then drag this lock icon inside the frame, but there is a faster way to replace the frames. To replace a frame, select this one, just copy this using Command C and then select this frame and hit Command Shift R on your keyboard to replace it. Now just change the color to text secondary and there you have it. Let's delete this one. Now let's quickly do a remember me option. First we need a checkbox. So let's draw a frame. Let's give it 20px height and 20px width and let's give it a color. In styles and variables, we see all these light color backgrounds. We don't have anything dark gray that we want. We actually have it in text primary, but if we choose that, there's going to be a problem because in future, if I just wanted to change the text color, this will also change the background color of this checkbox. We don't want that. So we can quickly create a new style in local style, click plus, select a color. Let's name this peachy inverse and let's give this dark gray color. Now let's select this and apply peachy inverse. Let's zoom in and let's give it a 6px corner radius so that it has rounded edges. Yeah, that works. Now let's bring in a check icon from our remix library, drag it over here, and it's too big for our frame. So let's change the height and width to 16px. You can click here to resize proportionally. Let's put this inside our icon frame and align it in the middle. For the color of this icon, I'm going to use text on color. Let's add text, remember me, change color to text primary, change the body size to body MD. Let's frame them together as these belong together. So select them both and click frame selection. And let's drag it over here and put them right on the left. There you go. For forget password, I'm going to just duplicate this text over here. Now, again, the text is inside the frame, so hold down the command and then click to select it and hold down the option key and drag to duplicate and drag it outside the frame so it's not part of that frame anymore. Let's change the text to forgot password. Let's drag it over here, make sure everything else is aligned. Next, we need a sign in button. So select this frame, Command C to copy, select this frame and hit Command V to paste. And let's just drag it over here. Now change text to sign in. Make sure the text is center aligned before you change it. Next, we have the divider with the text in the middle. So for text, I'm just going to duplicate this one. Change the color to text secondary, change the text to sign in with social media, and let's just center align this. And for the divider, I'm going to use this line shape and just draw a line over here. Hold on the shift key on your keyboard while drawing to keep it perfect straight line. Just like this, I'm gonna give it a stroke color of border primary. Let's just duplicate this over here on the other side. Hold on the option key, click and drag to duplicate and place it over here. Let's make sure everything is aligned perfectly and make sure the text is in the middle as well. Perfect. Finally, we need two buttons for social media sign in and a create new account link. So for the buttons, it's similar to the outline button. So let's just duplicate this one over here. Let's change the text to sign in with Google. For the Google icon, I could download them from the internet and just import them as images, but let's just use another plugin. The one that I recommend for social media logos is Better Logos. Run that. Look for Google icon. Let's bring this one inside here. If drag doesn't work, just click it and there we have it. It has edited. Let's change it to 24px width and 24px height. Put it in place next to the text with some nice margin. Let's select both of them and let's just move them in the middle. These guides are basically lifesavers, trust me. Let's duplicate it one more time. Change the text to sign in with Facebook. Let's move it a bit on the right for now. Go to the same plugin, look for Facebook icon, click to add. Let's change the width to 24px and height to 24px as well. And remember how we do place stuff. Select this, Command X to cut it, and select this frame, and then press Command Shift R to replace. Now just align them together in the middle. There you go. Now let's duplicate this text over here, change it to not a member, create a new account. But I need this create new account to be in our brand color. So let's double click this text to edit and select this part of the text in colors. And let's select our brand color. Now everything is on the lower end. I'm gonna need them to be a bit higher. So I'm just gonna select all of these and just move them a bit higher like this. There you go. We have our beautiful login page ready. But there's a big problem. This frame size is for iPhone 16. But what about a phone size that is a bit smaller or maybe a bit bigger? Let's try to resize this frame here. Look how the items do not adapt to the changing frame size. That's because this design is not responsive. Our responsive design is which adapts to the changing frame size. In our case, it should adapt to different font sizes, which brings us to one of the most important features of Figma that will save you a lot of time, AutoLayout. To understand AutoLayout, look at this example. Let's say that we have a few boxes placed in not any organized way. Now, if we put these boxes in another box and call that box a container, nothing changes. But if we add an AutoLayout to the container, every box inside the container aligns itself into a stack. The space between the container and the boxes on the x-axis is called horizontal padding, and the space between the container and the boxes on the y-axis is called vertical padding, and the space between the boxes itself is called gap. Now, we can also control the direction of an auto layout. It could be vertical, just like this, or it could be horizontal. What about the boxes inside? These boxes can have different widths with respect to the container. To understand this, let's remove 3 of these boxes. Now we have only 2 boxes. These boxes currently have a fixed width of 125 px. We can change the width of one of these boxes and set it to something called fill the container. If we do that, see how the right box is expanding to fill the container. If we change both of them to fill container, then both of them will grow to fill the container equally. We can also set the width of these boxes to hug content, which will change the width to hug the contents inside it. And currently, we have a gap of 30 px in between them. But what if I wanted to put them apart from each other on each end of the container? Well, we can set the gap to auto, and it will automatically set them apart at each end. And that's the basics of auto layout. Have a look at this card. This card has been created using auto layouts within auto layouts. This is called nested auto layouts. So now if the card width increases or decreases, it remains 100% responsive and does not break the design. Now let's explore how we can create auto layouts in Figma. I can make this frame into an auto layout, but it might be a bit hard for you to understand. So let's actually create another frame next to it so I can explain better. Press F, hold Option key and click this plus to add a similar empty frame next to it. Now, this is a best practice to make everything in an auto layout right from the start. So to add an auto layout to this frame, just right click and select add auto layout. See, nothing changed visually. Only on left, we can see that this layer icon has changed from a regular frame to auto layout. And now we have some extra options here for auto layout. We can set the width and height, but now we have additional options like hug contents and add minimum or maximum width or height. We will come to these later in a bit. Now look at this. This is where you can control the direction of an auto layout. Remember, as I explained, it's a stack that can be horizontal or vertical. Currently, it's set to vertical. This frame is an auto layout container now, and everything inside it will be the contents of that container. Let's actually copy some items inside it. Let's multi-select this logo, both of these texts and this input field, and just press Command C to copy and paste it inside here. Now we have 4 content items inside this container. Notice how it is automatically putting all the contents into a vertical stack. If we change the direction to horizontal, it will put them into a horizontal stack. Let's set it to vertical for now. Don't worry about this third option here because we will discuss it later in this video. This gap option is where you can control the gap between the contents. I can also control the gap right from the frame just like this. I can also select auto gap right from this drop down to push everything apart from each other at an equal distance, just like how I explained earlier. Now, when even the height changes, all of them still stay apart from each other. From this option here, you can set how you want to align the items within the container, left, right, or in the middle. For now, let's just keep it in the middle. And from these padding options, you can control how much space you want around it. Remember, padding is always inwards. So if you increase horizontal padding, you can see that it is putting some padding around it horizontally inwards. You can change the padding from here as well. This is where you can control vertical padding. And from this little option here, you can individually control how much padding you want on each side. But currently, padding is not having much effect on the input field as we expected, and it is spilling over the padding, as you can see. Well, we can fix this. While this container has all these new auto layout options, if we select a content inside it, we can set the width or height of the content to fixed width or fill container. Now, this means exactly how it sounds. We can set the input to a fixed width of 200 px, so it will remain the same even if the container size changes. And if I set it to fill container, it means that now if I resize, see how it fills the container width and also respects the padding around it. Let's undo the resize for now. And now let's try to design our screen, we can have auto layouts within auto layouts. So based on how I want to design, I can put things in nested auto layouts. So if I need these two texts to be close to each other, select these both text and right click and add an auto layout. Now this is an auto layout container and these two texts are its contents. So we can control the gap and direction of this separately. By doing this, we can see that in our main login auto layout, we are actually left with three content items: this logo, this auto layout frame, and this input field. Let's rename this to sign in text. By the way, to remove an auto layout from a frame, just select a container and just press Command-Shift-G on your keyboard. Now the auto layout is removed. Let's undo it because we need the auto layout. Let's continue with our screen design. Select this login auto layout frame and change horizontal and vertical padding to 20px. Now let's start bringing in the rest of the stuff. If I drag any item inside this frame, it's gonna highlight to show me where I want to place the content inside the stack. Because this is an auto layout, of course, I can just drop it and it will automatically place it itself in the stack like this. Now change the position of this input field in the stack. I can just move it right from here in the layers, or I can also use the keyboard arrow keys to move it up or down in the stack. So let's place it at the bottom. If I select this input field, this is now the content of our auto layout container, but its width is set to fixed. And if I resize the main frame, it's gonna stay fixed. So let's change it to fill container to fix the responsiveness of this input field. And there you go. Now it's filling the container. That's beautiful. Let's reset the width of our main container to our original 393px. Now I want these to be together, so let's select both of them and add an auto layout. Let's rename this to form. Now I can change the gap between these two just like this. In the main login container, we have three contents now, but these are set to auto gap, which we don't want. So let's change the login frame from auto layout gap to 16px as well. We are already starting to see our designs coming into shape. Let's bring in these two in here as well. Now, if you see in the layers, we have 5 items: logo, sign in text, auto layout frame, from auto layout, forgot password text, and remember me frame. This remember me is just an ordinary frame right now, but it can be an auto layout as well, as we can see that it's a horizontal stack. So let's right click and make it into an auto layout just like this, and let's align it in the middle vertically inside the frame. Let me zoom in so that you can see what I did there. So if we have a frame that is bigger like this, we can align contents vertically in the middle right from here just like this. Let's undo the frame size and zoom out. Let's call this auto layout frame remember me. If I open this, we have a frame and text inside it as content. Frame is the icon, so let's name it icon. I can even make this an auto layout, but let's not complicate things too much for now. I need these two side by side, which means that these two can be in a stack as well. So let's add auto layout. Trust me, making auto layouts might seem a lot of work, but it makes everything so responsive and faster to edit in the long run. Now, it's an auto layout, but we want them in horizontal direction, so let's do that. Easy, but see, it's not on the edges as we want it to be. Even if I change the width to fill container, the frame size is now filling the container, but the text are still not on the edges like we want. Can you guess what's the problem here? It's simple. If we look at the gap, it's set to 16px. Let's change it to auto, and there you go, it's fixed. Both contents are now on each side of the frame. I want remember me on the other side, so I can just drag it over here in the frame, or again I can just use the keyboard arrow keys to move it where I want in the stack just like this. It's just basically changing the position inside the layers. I think you get it now. You understand how to use auto layout, so let's keep designing and pick up some speed. Let's bring this button in here. Change the width to fill container. Let's bring in this text and these two lines in here as well. Let's put them in horizontal auto layout like this so that we can control them together. These are currently vertically aligned to top. That's why we're not seeing them in the middle. So let's align it in the middle from both vertical and horizontal sides like this. Now everything is middle aligned. Change the name of the frame to something like social media options. Let's open this and just put this text between these two lines so that it's in the center. To test the responsiveness, I'm going to resize this frame so we can see that it's not responsive. So let's fix that. Now notice something. If I change the width of this frame to fill container, it's still not responsive. I want the lines to fill the container as well. Let's select the line and set it to fill the container. For the text width, I want it to hug the contents because I want the other two lines to be able to fill up all the extra space left by resizing the main login frame. So let's change the second line width to fill the container as well. Now, when I resize it, everything is responsive. And even if I change the text to anything, because it's hugging the contents, lines still fill up all the space, even with a shorter or longer text. Let's reset the main frame size to original 393px and bring in the rest of the items here as well. Move this text down in the stack using keyboard arrow keys. Let's resize to test if they're responsive. Nope, they're not. So let's try to fix this. I'm going to change the button width to fill the container, and it is filling the container, but there's still a problem now with the icon and the text. We can easily fix this. This button also looks like a stack, doesn't it? It has two contents, an icon and a text. So why not just make it into an auto layout as well? Now it's auto layout, which means it's a stack, so we can control the gap between them just like this and just align everything in the middle right from here and change the padding to 14px and 14px on both sides. Nice and clean. Let's quickly do it for the other button as well by following the exact same steps we did for the Google sign-in button. And now we have this one as auto layout as well. Everything is nice and responsive. The whole design is way too high than where I want it to be. That's because if I select this login auto layout frame, everything is aligned to top inside it. I can move it down by adding some top padding like this, but it's not a very good approach. Instead, let's just align everything in the middle vertically and horizontally just like this. And there you go. Everything is now in the middle. Now, if everything feels a bit too tight, we can control the gap from the main container like this, and it will add the gap between all of its contents. And if you want to be able to control the gap between specific sections only, you can just add auto layout frame around the frames that you want to be together. So for example, I can put these ones together in auto layout frame. Let's rename these layers. Let's call this one logo title, and let's just close these. Let's call this one form options. I can move this remember me and forget password container inside this form container. By the way, when dragging a container inside a container, only dragging it would not work. Hold down the command key while dragging to activate where you want to put it inside the container you are hovering over, and just drop it in. Let's move it down in the stack. Let's put them in auto layout, and let's rename the layer as well. Let's call this social buttons. Now I can control the gap between these individually. Now, if I change the gap in the main container, it's just gonna put the gap between its immediate contents, not within these sections that we just created. And we can control the gap between each section just like this. Let's actually remove the gap between the logo and the text and set it to 2. And that's how you make a design using auto layouts. I know it's a bit too much information to take in, but trust me, if you master this, you will design faster than 90% of the designers out there. Now remember, I told you that we can make this frame into auto layout. Now we can do this automatically with this new feature of Figma that is kind of a hit and miss right now because it's an experimental stage. So let's try it out. Select this frame, right click, and under more layout options, you will see suggest layout option. Click it. What it's going to do is that it's going to look at the positions of your items inside your frame and automatically try to create nested auto layouts to make it responsive. Now we can see that this is an auto layout, and if I resize, and it has done a pretty good job. But if I try it on this frame right here, see, now this is not completely responsive. This button is not acting how it should. And even if I select this button and try suggest auto layout feature on this, it still doesn't get it right. It's a nice feature if it works, but mostly in real-time scenarios, you always design in auto layouts from start, and that's a key thing that will make you a Figma expert. Let's delete this frame because we don't need it anymore. Now, what if I needed a floating help button over on the bottom right corner? You might have seen these kinds of buttons on different apps, but if you haven't, let me show you what I mean. Let's bring in the help icon from our remix library. This is just a regular frame with the icon shape inside it. Now let's make it into an auto layout. Now our frame is an auto layout with only one content inside it. Let's select the shape within and give it some color. Give this auto layout a fixed width of 40 and a height of 40 as well, and align everything in the middle. Give this frame a stroke of border primary. I need a full rounded button, so let's increase the corner radius to 999. Now it's a circular frame because the corner radius are fully rounded. Actually, I think it's still a bit too small. We have a scale tool in our toolbar. select it right from here, and now we can use this scale tool to scale things proportionally like this. You can also set the scale settings right from here if you want. I like the scale now. Let's close these scale options right from here. Now if I drag this button inside our frame, because our main login frame is also an auto layout, if I place it over here, it just stacks it inside the container. But I need the icon to be floating in the right corner, and I need it to be always fixed on this right bottom corner. In position settings, we have this option that says ignore auto layout. If we click this, now our selected frame is not respecting the rules of auto layout it is placed in, which means that we can move it freely anywhere in the frame now. But see, we have these constraints options now. Constraints are used to pin something to its parent frame. Let me explain. At this moment, we have a horizontal constraint set to left and a vertical constraint set to top. Constraints are also shown by these dotted lines. When I resize this main frame, we can see that our help button remains in its position because it is pinned to left and top of the main frame. Even if I move this button over here, which I can do now because we selected to ignore auto layout frame for this button. Now if I resize again, it still stays in the same position, but actually I want it to be always in the right bottom corner. So how can we achieve this? If I select it and change the horizontal constraint from left to right, now see this dotted line shows that it is pinned to the right side of the main frame. Now if I resize, it always stays pinned to the right side of the parent frame. Horizontally, it's working fine. But now if the height changes, look, it doesn't stay pinned to the bottom, which means that we just need to change the vertical constraint from top to bottom like this. See, now it is pinned to the right and the bottom. By the way, you can also change constraints from this visual control. It's the same thing as the drop down. Anyways, now if I resize it horizontally or vertically, it always remains pinned to the right bottom corner. Let's actually give this button a fill color so it doesn't show anything behind it. This is how we can make frames behave freely inside an auto layout. By the way, constraints can work even if something is not inside an auto layout. Actually, before auto layout was introduced in Figma, constraints was the way to make things responsive, but it was very time taking. Then auto layout was released and made our lives so much easier. Anyways, let's delete this because we don't need this in our design. I just added it to show you the functionality of ignore, auto layout, and constraints. Give yourself a pat on the back if you've been able to follow up to this stage because you're doing great. If you have any questions, just drop them in the comment section. After this course, I will do a FAQ video session to answer everybody's question. So make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you get notified as soon as I post a new video. And if you are finding this video to be useful, please do hit that like button. It doesn't cost you anything, but it does motivate me to put free content out there. All right, so you might have noticed something. Some of these things are being repeated, like this input field and this button. And imagine if we have like 100 frames, and if I decide to tweak the design of this input field, I will have to do it everywhere, wherever these elements are being used in 100 frames. That could take hours. I know what you might be thinking. Well, we can change it in the local style. Well, let me stop you there. What about I change the corner radius of this input to 12px? I can't do this in the local styles. For these repetitive elements, we can create components. Let's go to our reference file, and if I select this input field, you will see that this is not just an ordinary frame. This diamond icon tells me that it's an instance of a component. And if I right click on it, I have this option to go to main component. If I click that, it will take me to the main component. Component is like an original, and you can make unlimited copies of that. And those copies are basically called instances of that component. And if the original component changes, the copies, also known as the instances, also get updated with those changes. So for example, if I increase the padding on this input, because this is a component, see how it has updated padding for all these input fields, because these are the copies of that original component. Component can also help us make different variations of an element. For example, if I select this instance of the button component, I have this little option to change the type of the button from primary to secondary. And now this button is an outline button. We also have this toggle to switch on the leading icon. If I turn this on, it's asking me to select an icon I want. I can change it to any icon I want from here. Similarly, we can also turn on the trailing icon and select the icon we want. So that's all possible because of the power of components. Now let's go back to our file and learn how to make components and variants of the components from scratch. I can make components out of each of these elements, but let's create one from scratch so it's easier for you to follow. So this is how we would make a button component. Add a text, give it a color you want. Let's make it into auto layout as we need icons in the stack. We have a container around it. Let's rename this as button. Let's give this fill color of brand orange. Let's add some padding around it, add some corner radius, and let's actually make the text white as it looks better on orange. So far, it's the same deal that we have been doing. It's an AutoLayout frame with one text content in it. That's it, nothing special. To make this into a component, I can press this little star-shaped option over here. Or I can just right click and select create component. And of course, the shortcut key is option command K. Now it's a component. In the layers, we can see that a component is represented by this star-shaped icon. Well, we have our component. Now what? This is important. We don't use the component directly in our designs. This is the original. You gotta keep this safe. What we can do is that we can make copies of this original by just duplicating it, just like how we duplicate any other item. Or we can go to assets, and if I select created in this file, this is where all the original components that we created will show up. So we can just drag this over onto our canvas and make instance of this component. If I change the color of the original component to something like white, every instance automatically gets updated. This not only works for the color, it also works for any other design changes you decide to make, like changing size or adding corner radius. Whatever change you make gets updated in the instances. But if I make a change directly to the instance, it will override the change in that instance only. You can override properties like text, fill, stroke, effects, the size of the frame, but the properties that affect the layout of anything within the instance cannot be changed. Anyways, if you have made any overrides, you can reset it to the original from this option here. This will reset all the changes. But if you would like to reset only a specific property, you can go in here and select the property that you want to reset. You can have unlimited instances of a component. And if you want to jump to the original source of the component, just right click on the instance and select go to the component, and Figma will automatically locate and select the component for you, no matter where that original component is placed. If you somehow accidentally delete the original component, there is a way to restore it. Just right click on any instance of that component, and under component option, we have this restore component option. There you go, it has restored the original component. Let's delete these instances and let's change this button design to what we actually want it to be. Let's jump back to our reference file for a moment. Select this login and let's just preview it. Notice something. When I hover on this button, it changes slightly. The button slightly fades out to show some interactive feedback to the user of the app. And if I press this button, it changes to black. In other words, we have a default button state, then we have a hovered and a pressed state for this button that appears when I hover or click on it. Similarly, when I click on this checkbox, it turns on and off. So how do we do this? Let's learn. To achieve this, and actually much more than this, we can create variants of a component. To add a variant, just select the component and just press this little plus icon. This will create a similar variant to the main one. In the layers, we can see that we have our button component, and then we have two variants inside it, default and variant 2. These are not two different components. These are just two variants of one component. If I look over here, we have some options. This here shows the component, which is the button, and here we can see the properties of selected variant. Currently, I have variant 2 selected, and it has created a default property by the name of property 1 and set it to variant 2. I can double click on this to change it so that it makes sense for me. For example, I can call this one as a status property, or you could call it state. You can call this whatever you like. And I want this second variant to be a hovered state. So I can just type in hovered. Again, you can type anything you want, but I'm just naming it hovered so that it makes sense for me later on. With this second variant selected, I'm just going to slightly change the appearance to make it look like a hovered state. So for that, I'm just going to bring down the opacity to about 60%. Now, if I create an instance of this component, I will see this property of status that we just created. From this drop down, I can select the variant I want. And if I select hovered, it automatically changes the button style to that hovered state that we just created earlier. Using this technique, we can can quickly switch between these two different variants with ease. Now, if I wanted to create another variant of a button to show how a button would look like when it's clicked or pressed, I can just select this button component again and click this little plus icon to add another variant. We can create unlimited variants, by the way. For the status property that we created earlier, it has given it a default name. We can change it to something like pressed, just like we did for the hovered variant. And for this variant, I'm gonna change the background color to dark and make the text white like this. Now we have 3 variants of this button component, and if I select the instance, now I will have that third variant available in this dropdown as well. So far, very basic stuff. This is where things get more interesting. So if I select this component, not a variant, the main component, I see in the properties that I have option to add more component properties. I can create a variant property, a text property, a Boolean property, and an instance swap property. These properties can help you create more variations of any component without actually needing to design different frames. Let me explain. So far, we just have variations of different statuses of this button, like hovered and pressed. But what if I wanted a different kind of button, like an outline button, and I want that button to actually have a hover and pressed variant as well? We can achieve this using variant properties. So let's create another variant property. In the name, I'm just gonna say something like button style. You could call it whatever you like, for example, button type or something, but I'm just gonna say button style. For the value, I'm gonna leave it default and hit create property. If I select any variant of this component now, I can see that I have newly created property available in the properties section. And for all of these, it's currently set to default. If I add another variant now, it's gonna give me an error saying that the properties of this new variant are conflicting with others, which means that there is already a variant in our component whose status and button style are set to default, which is true. If I select this, we can see that both of them are also default. So let's change the button style property for this new variant to secondary. You can call it outline or other button, whatever suits you. And let's change the design of this button to make it a bit different. I'm going to add a stroke around it, get rid of the fill, and change the text color to text primary. Let's resize the component frame size and let's just put it over here. By the way, it doesn't matter where you put the variants inside the component box. Just make sure that these are inside this component box pink outline. Now that we have our different style of the button ready, if I select this instance, I can change the status and also set the button style to secondary that we just created. I can make it into some other style of the button with just one click. But there is still a problem that we have this secondary button selected, but if I change the status, it will switch back to the orange button. That's because we don't have any variants of the statuses of the secondary button variant. So let's quickly add those. Select this variant and hit plus to add another variant. Let's move it over here under this. It's giving me the same warning as these both have the same properties. So let's change the status property for this one to hovered and change the opacity to make it look a bit different for the hovered status. Let's add another one, move it down, change the status property to pressed for this one. And for the look of a pressed button, let's make it 100% opacity and add a subtle gray fill background. And now I can just make this button to any variant I like. Default with all different statuses. And then we have secondary button with hovered and pressed statuses as well. By the way, if I want to have this button style property above this status property, what I can do is I can select this button component and just drag these properties where I want. And now when I select the instance, in the instance properties, I can see that button style is above the status property. Cool. Now let's explore other properties that we can create. Let's create a text property. In the name, you can say whatever. I'm going to say something like label. You will understand why I named it this label in just a second. And for the default value, let's set it to my button. Look, now it's giving us an error that this is not being used. We have our property created. We just need to map this property with our text of our button. I can select all these texts by holding Command Shift and just selecting one by one. But other faster way is to just select one of these texts and press this option to select matching layers. This will select all the layers in the component with the same name. With all of our text selected, we can see what each of this text says over here. Currently, it is set to button, and next to it, we have this option to apply variable or a property. Click it, and in here, you can either create a new property like we did before, or you can choose a property that we have already created. And now we can see that all the texts have been mapped to this property and all of these texts have changed to my button. And if I select this instance now, it will show us the label property set to my button by default, and I can change it to whatever I want. It makes use of the components easier and faster. Just select any instance and change the property directly from here. Let's look at the instance swap property now. If I create instance swap property, it's going to ask for a name, and in the value, it's going to ask for an instance of a component. Instance swap property actually helps us swap the instances used within a component variant. For example, we can have an icon instance inside this variant and we can swap it out with other icon. But currently we don't have any other components or instances except for this button actually. So let's bring in some icons from our remix library. We can make anything into a component. So let's just right click on this icon and select create component. And now it's a component. Let's do it for the other one as well. By the way, here's a nice little trick. Let's undo this. If I select multiple things and click this little drop down, I have option to create a component, but it will just create one component. I want them as a different components, not one component. So I can choose to create multiple components. And there you have it. I can even combine two or more components as variants and it will make them into one component, but it will add the other one as a variant. But for now, let's not do that. If we go back to creating new instance swap property of our button component, we have these icons available, but it's not going to do anything even if I select this. I first need to place any instance of this icon inside the button so that I can swap it out later on. I'm going to make an instance of this icon component and place it inside here. This is an AutoLayout frame, so it's automatically going to put it into a stack, nice and smooth. Let's change the size of the icon so that it fits, and let's change the color to white. I have just placed it in one of these buttons and actually I want it to be inside all of these buttons. So let's just copy this, Command C, and select rest of the buttons and press Command V to paste, and then use the arrow keys to move it on the left in the stack. Inside the outline buttons, let's change the color to text primary because that suits better for the outline button. Now let's make these icons swappable. To do that, let's select all of these icons. Now, as these icons are just instances of our icon component, we have this option available here to create instance swap property. Just click it. Let's name this leading icon. You can call it whatever you want. Default value is already set to our current instance, and that's exactly what we want. And let's just remove any preferred value from here as we don't need it, and hit create property. Now, if I select the instance of this button, I have this leading icon swapping property. I can just swap it out with any other component instance that I like. For example, a lock. Now remember that this lock is also an instance of an actual component of an icon that we created earlier. Now you have to understand, instance swap does not just swap icons. It can be created for any instance of a component and we can swap it with any other instance. In our example, we are just swapping it with other icons. Let's add a trailing icon. Select all of these, press Command D to duplicate all of these, and just use the right arrow keys to move them to the right in the stack. Now, as we have duplicated this, these are also mapped to our original leading icon property. We can unlink these from this option here and create a new instance swap property for these icons. Let's call it trailing icon and keep the default value same, and let's just remove the preferred value and create property. And now we can swap out the trailing icon as well. It's time we talk about this Boolean property. Now, if I want the option to hide or show these icons, or maybe hide this text and one of these icons, we can use the Boolean properties to toggle the visibility to on or off for anything inside the instance. Let's learn how to do that. Create a Boolean property and let's just call this show leading icon, and default value I'm going to set it to false. Our property is now created. Let's map it. Let's select these leading icons, and in the parent settings, we have the option to apply this Boolean property that we just created. As soon as we apply this property, you can see that all the icons have disappeared. That's because we set the Boolean property default value to false. What it's doing is that it's mapping the visibility property to that Boolean property, and whatever the Boolean property will be, it is going to set that visibility to it. So if the Boolean property changes to true, it's going to turn on the visibility. If it's false, it's going to turn off the visibility. Let's repeat the same process for the trailing icons. create a new Boolean property. Let's call it show trailing icon. Set default value to false as well. Now select all of these trailing icons, and in the appearance, click over here and apply this trailing icon property that we created. Let's test it out. Select this instance of the button. Now we can see that we can control the visibility of both of these icons separately with these toggle buttons, just like this. By the way, you can control the arrangement of these properties right from here, as I showed you earlier. Just select the component, drag the property where you want, and it will just show up there. And if I just want an icon button without any text, I can turn off the trailing icon and get rid of the text from here. But still, it doesn't work as we want it to because it's not center aligned. We have this unbalanced padding. Better way is to just create a Boolean property for the text as well. So let's select all of these texts and create a new Boolean property from this plus option here. I can do it the other way as well by selecting the component and creating the property and then mapping it, or I can just select all of this text and create a new property right from here. Both of the ways do exactly the same thing. Let's call this one show label, and by default I want it to be true, and hit create. I'm going to move it to this position so it appears first. If I select the instance of the button, I can also control the visibility of the text. And this is how I can create an icon button by just turning off the trailing icon and the text, and it will always remain in the middle. And see, now we can make different variants of this button from any instance, just like this. By the way, look at how the color of the icon is white for the orange button and black on the secondary button. And that's the power of instance swap property. Here's the deal. Using instance swap properties, I can make all of these variants of a button just from these 6 actual variants of the button. When you are happy with your component, you have created variants and everything, you can put these components anywhere you like. These are not going to be part of actual preview. What I like to do is I just create a new page and call it components and just cut and paste it over there so that my main page remains clean and organized. Let's go back to our main page and let's switch out this regular button frame to a component that we created. Go to assets and just drag and drop this button inside over here, and it's gonna paste an instance of this button component and get rid of this one. Let's set the width to fill container. Let's change the label to sign in right from here. See how easy and simple this is. Now say that we need a trailing icon of an arrow. So let's just turn it on and try to change the icon. But we don't have any more icon components. We just have these 2 that we just brought in from the remix library and created components out of that. Well, we can do that for every icon, but that's going to take a lot of time. So what I like to do is let's go to Figma community. And remember how we talked about this briefly in the start, that Figma community is where people post their projects to use for free, and sometimes it can be paid. Well, I can search a remix in this community to see if anybody has already created components of all remix icons. It's gonna give us a bunch of results. Some of them are plugins and some of them are actual projects. I'm just gonna filter out files and templates, and we can see that there are a bunch of people who have already created project files for remix icons where they will have all the icons as components. I'm going to choose this one from by Maxim, as this is the latest version and has most updated icons. Select it and open it in Figma. It's going to copy this file in your draft and open this file for you. On this page, we have like an introduction. This is like just a cover page. On the left, we can see that we have this icons page. Let's go in that, and there you have it. We have all of these icons as components neatly organized for us. If I select any of these in the layers, we can see that this is in fact a component and not just a regular frame. I'm just gonna select all of these and copy it, and then go to my file, and in the components page, I'm gonna just paste it. And let's just delete these ones because these will already be in the list that we just pasted. But remember, the icons that we have just deleted are being used inside our button component as default icons, right? So let's turn them on for a second. Just select the component. In the show leading icon, just turn this one on, and see this mail icon was instance of the mail icon that we just deleted. So that's why it has this option to restore the main component, but we don't want to restore it. We just need to replace it from the list that we just got. So let's select this component and turn on the trailing icon as well, because we are going to replace for both of them. In the leading icon property, change the value to some random icon like a circle, and replace the trailing icon with the circle icon instance as well. This circle icon is basically from the list that we brought in from Figma community. I'm going to turn off them by default because I don't want to show them by default. In the main page, now I can select the button instance and switch out this trailing default circle icon and look for an arrow icon unlike this one. And there you have it. Now I'm going to just copy this instance, Command C, select this button over here and press Command Shift R to replace it with this instance. And now this is an instance of a button component as well. And let's change the label to get started. For this sign in button, I'm gonna copy this instance again and replace it just like before. And we need it to be outline button. So we have already created a variant for that. So let's select that from here and boom, it's changed. Now I'm gonna just change the text to sign in and disable the trailing icon because I don't need it for this button. Let's bring in another instance in here for these buttons. Fill the container, change the text to sign in with Google, change the style to secondary to make it outlined button, turn on the leading icon and search for Google icon. Select this one. But see, the icons that we brought in from Figma community are one color icons. I want this to be a colored icon for the Google, just like in the above example. Actually, this Google icon that we brought in from Better Logos plugin is already an instance. We can see that. See, in the logos, it has this diamond shape instance icon. But if this is an instance of a Google icon, it means that this is a copy of a main component of Google icon. But where is the main component? Remember how we talked about that if the main component is not available, we can restore it right from this option that says restore main component. And there it is. This is the main component now. It has been restored. Let's put it on the side for now. Let's do this for the Facebook icon as well. I'm going to restore this icon and now I'm just going to move both of these in the components page to keep everything organized. Let's go back to our main page. Now, if I select this button instance and search for Google icon in the leading icon property, I can see that we have this colorful Google icon. Select that and it will get applied. Let's just get rid of these regular frames because we don't need them anymore. We're just going to use the instance of the button. I'm going to select this instance of this button now and duplicate it one more time. And let's try to add Facebook icon for this. But see, we have a problem for this. Even though the icon that we selected was blue, but it changed to black. The thing is that Figma tries to give it a color of default icon. To fix that, there's a trick that I learned. Go to main component and inside the component, select all of these shapes and just right click and select outline stroke, and now it magically fixes this problem. I know that this is kind of weird and I'm still not sure how this works, but this is a trick that I learned over the years working with Figma. If anybody knows what this is all about, let me know as well. Let's select the instance and change the label to sign in with Facebook. So now you can see that we have just created one button component and used it for all of these different kinds of buttons. Let's create a component for this input field here as well. We have already designed the input field, so let's just make it into a component. Nice and easy. Duplicate it one more time to create an instance. See, in the layers we have the component and the instance now. Let's bring out this component and place it over here. Let's duplicate it one more time for the password field. Let's get rid of this old regular password input field frame. We currently have no properties where I can switch icon and stuff, so let's quickly do that. Select the main component, and inside the main component, if we look at this icon, this is just a regular frame. Remember, we used this from that Remix plugin earlier. This is not a component, so we cannot make it swappable. So let's go to assets and actually bring in the mail icon from the components instead of a regular frame. Let's try to place it inside this over here, and it does not work because it's not an auto layout frame. This is why we always use auto layouts. No worries, let's make it into our auto layout. Select this and press Shift A to make it into an auto layout. Again, this is a shortcut key to make auto layout, but see, it has destroyed the design. So let's investigate what's going on. Oh, it has set it to wrap the content. Let's make it horizontal auto layout rather than a wrap auto layout. Let's increase the width a bit and add a padding of 16px on both sides. And let's just align everything vertically in the center and left on the horizontal axis. Now let's move this icon over in the left in the stack. You know how to do this by now, and just delete this regular frame and actually just change the icon color to text secondary as well. It's a bit too tight, so let's add some gap to it. Beautiful. This icon is now an instance of the mail icon component. So we can create instance swap property by just clicking this little option. Let's call this leading icon and create property. And while we are at it, let's select the text and create a text property right from here, just like we did before, and call this label. I don't want anything to be hidden in this input, so I don't want to create any Boolean property or anything like that. If I select the instance now, I can just swap this icon to lock icon from mail icon and change the label to enter your password. And let's put this input component in the components page. By the way, we can create more variants of this input like hover states and focus states, but I'm not gonna do that. You probably know how it's done by now. Let's come back and make this checkbox into a component just like this, and just duplicate it by using Command D shortcut key on your keyboard to create an instance. And let's just move this original to our components page by cutting and pasting it into the page. Perfect. So now for this checkbox, I want an on and off state. So let's add a variant just like this. Change the property name to something like toggle, and I'm going to call it unchecked. And for this variant, I'm gonna call this checked instead of default. Let's change the design of the unchecked variant, add a stroke to it, and maybe remove the fill and select this checkbox and just delete it. Duplicate it over here to make an instance to test it out, and see we have the toggle property to change it to check and uncheck just like this. While we are at it, let's select both of these texts and create a text property for them as well. Let's call this label, and let's add a Boolean property to make it visible or hidden so that I can hide this label if I want. Let's call it show label, and by default it's gonna be true, and now I can even hide and show the label of this checkbox just like this. We are done with our login page. Next, let's check out our reference file, and we're now going to design this screen. And I can already see that we have a few things being repeated that I can make into components. So let's dig in. Add an empty frame. Let's call this like a home. Change the field color to our local variable bg primary. Let's add a text over here. Let's call this deliver to. Change the color, size is good. Let's add another one over here. Change the color for this one to text primary, and let's type in a placeholder address just like this. And let's bring in a drop down icon, search arrow down in our components, and let's just bring this one in. Set both of these and add an auto layout in horizontal direction. Let's bring in a bell icon and place it over here. Let's select this text and this frame and add another auto layout on top of it. It's gonna be vertical auto layout, so it's already vertical, so that's good. Let's call this delivery address in the layers. And finally, select both of them and add a horizontal auto layout. Remember, the shortcut key for auto layout is Shift A. Let's call this top nav bar. Next, we need a search input, so I'm just gonna bring the instance of the input field component that we created earlier and just swap the icon to search icon and change the label to search. I want this main frame to be a stack as well, so let's add a vertical auto layout to it. The height has changed because it's hugging the contents. Let's just resize it and it will make it fixed height, just like this. Let's add some 20px padding around it so it looks consistent with the previous frame. Let's reduce the gap to something like 16px. I am going a bit fast now because there is nothing new right now. Next, we are going to create this category card. So let's bring in the image. It is in the downloaded assets that we downloaded earlier. We have this image folder inside it, and we can select this image and just click and drag to draw it. Hold Shift to keep it proportional. Let's place it over here, simple and clean. Now I need the image to be circular rather than a rectangle that it is now. I can try to make the corners rounded like this. By the way, you can do it like this as well rather than in the properties, but it still doesn't give us the perfect circle. What we can do instead is just drag an ellipsis over here and just hold down the Shift key to make it into a perfect circle and just place it over here. In the layers, let's put this ellipsis under the image layer and then select both of them and right click and select mask. It's gonna mask this image over this circle shape, and there you go, we have our circle image. And in the layers, we can see that it has masked it and put it inside a masked group. Let's call this category card image. If I select this image, I can move this image freely to adjust the view. We can also resize the image. And if I select this ellipsis shape inside the mask, I can move it to the area which I need to be exposed. This is called masking, and it's a very cool way to crop shapes without any destructive steps. Anyways, we have our masked image. Now let's add text and type in chicken burger. I like chicken burgers. Let's choose the color to text secondary and move it over here. Let's select both of these and make it into an auto layout. Shift A, nice and easy. Let's rename the layer to category card. Now it's a vertical auto layout with two contents inside it. Let's adjust the gap a bit and add some padding around it. And let's just resize a bit on the both sides and align it in the middle. Now add some background and some corner radius to make the rounded edges. I want some shadow behind this card. Well, good news is that we can just select this frame and add some effect right from here, and we can add inner shadows, drop shadows, background blur, and layer blur effects. For now, let's just go with the drop shadow. It will give it a default drop shadow, and from this option here we can control the settings of the drop shadow. We can change the position of the shadow from here. We can change the blur from this option right here. Pretty straightforward. Let's set it to 0 on X, 4 on Y, and blur. Yeah, this feels fine, so let's keep it like this. And here you can choose the color and opacity of the color. I'm just gonna keep it black and set the opacity to maybe 12 for a more softer shadow. By the way, I can make a local style from this drop shadow so that I can use it again and again without having to change the settings every time. And let's call this shadow light. All right, so once we are happy with the design of our card, we can just make it into a component like this. Let's bring an instance of this card inside our frame and duplicate it a bunch of times, and also add an auto layout. By default, it has added a vertical auto layout to it. I can try to make it horizontal and set the width to fill, but it is kind of overflowing, and actually I don't want it like this. I want 2 cards in each row, and anything beyond that should go into the next row. That's called wrapping, and we can use this option to wrap the auto layout as well. I'm gonna rename this layer to categories. Now when I resize this, you can see that we have this empty space over here, and I know what you're thinking. These cards are not filling the container. You are partially correct, so let's do that. Select these cards and set the width to fill. But again, now all of these cards are just filling up the space in one direction. Wrap isn't working. This is where the minimum and the maximum width and height comes in. So if I select this parent component, in the width, I can set a minimum width and set it to something like 150px. Now, what does that mean? It means that the width of this card in an auto layout cannot be less than the value that you add here. Beyond this value, it can go to any size. And because we have set it to fill the container, that's why the third card is taking up all that space. And if I try to resize it now, as soon as the width of the card goes below 150px, it just wraps it and takes it to another row. Let's add a few more cards, and we can see that as we add it, it automatically wraps it nicely into 2 columns. Now to replace the images in the cards, let's go to upload image option right from here and multi-select all of these images and click open. Now see how the mouse cursor is showing 5 images. I can just click on the image I want to replace and it will start replacing the images one by one. Beautiful. Let's now change the text on these categories. So we have 5 different color categories. So let's type them all in. Great. Now it's time to add this navigation. Let's go back to our file. First thing I'm going to need is an icon. So search for home icon in our components. Let's bring this one in. Change the color to our brand color. Let's add some text. Change the color of the text. Size is a bit too big for this navigation because we don't have much room in the navigation area, but we don't have any smaller text size in our local style. So let's unlink this and reduce the size to 12px and then add it back into our local style and call it body SM. Now we have another local style and it has applied it to this text. Let's select both of these, add an auto layout, add some padding. Padding isn't working because the width of this frame is set to fixed. Let's change it to hug the contents. And this text should also hug the contents to occupy the space that it needs. And now let's call this frame nav item. Let's make it a component because this is going to be reused. I need a variant for an inactive state. So let's add a variant. Remember how we did it. Click this plus icon and boom, we have our new variant added. In the layers, we can see that we now have 2 variants in the nav item component. Let's change the property name to something like state and set this one to unselected or inactive, whatever you want to call it, and just change the color to text secondary for both the icon and the text. I want these icons to be swappable. So select both of these and click this add an instance property option. Let's call this icon. We don't want any preferred values, so let's remove that and create the property. I also need a property to change the text. So select both of these texts, create a text property like this, and let's leave it as text and create property. Our nav item component is now ready. Let's create an instance. Now in the properties, we can change the states and we can swap these icons. Perfect. Now I just need to create a navigation bar out of these nav items. To do that, let's create an instance of this active state over here and then 3 instances of inactive states over here. Just change the icons and text to the icons and navigation options that we want, like search, order, and finally account. Let's select them all and put them into a horizontal auto layout and call this navigation bar. And before I adjust the gap between them, let's actually see how this will look in our design. And before I do that, let's make a component because this is going to be reused, and just drag an instance of this component inside our frame. Let's make it fill container. Now let's change the gap and set it to auto because that's what we want in our design. Let's add a top stroke on the navigation to separate it from the rest of the page. Oops, I think I removed the auto gap accidentally. Let's add it back. Okay. But see, this is not exactly what I want. The top border isn't going all the way to the edges of the screen. And that's because we have this padding of 20 px on our main auto layout frame. So let's remove that. But now all the other content is touching the edges. Well, to fix that, I can just select all of them except the navigation and just put them into a separate auto layout and add a padding to this auto layout that we just created. Finally, for our navigation item, I can add a little bit of padding, but it will not affect the border going to the edges because remember I told you the padding is inverse. Now everything is looking perfect, exactly how I want it to be. What if I change the height? Well, the navigation is not sticking to the bottom. Why is that? That's because we have a fixed gap of 16 px between these two frames. Let's change it to auto and now it's fine. Let's see what happens if I add more categories. See how this is breaking into our navigation? This is because we don't have any fill background to our navigation bar component. So let's add that and there you go. Now it's fine. Let's preview this frame and test something out. Select this frame and hit play to preview. Notice we have many categories. So this section should be scrollable, but it isn't. So let's fix it. I want this exact section to be scrollable. So with this section selected, I can go into prototype view and I have this option here for overflow. I can change it to vertical scroll if I want it to scroll vertical. And if I want to scroll horizontally, I can set it to horizontal. For now, let's set it to vertical scroll. But still, if I go to preview, it doesn't scroll. That's because we have a hugged content height for this section. So there is no room for scroll. For the scroll to work, we must always have a fixed height and the content should go beyond that height. So if I resize this container to something like this, now it's a fixed height. We can see that it's a fixed height over here of 608 px, and let's reduce it a little bit more and we can see that the categories are obviously going beyond this height point. So if I turn this clip content option, it will not show anything that is going outside the frame boundaries. Now let's go to the preview and try it out. Now we can see that it is scrolling beautifully. All right, so this page is also ready. Let's put these components into our component page to keep everything nice and tidy. Finally, let's duplicate this frame as it's gonna be pretty similar page and I don't want to start from scratch. Let's first make our chicken burger item card. So first thing I need is the image, of course. So let's go to upload image, add this image over here and then add some text and give it text primary color. Now duplicate it one more time and I want this one to be multiple line text, so I can just drag it over here to add some height to it. Let's type in some ingredients of this Cajun burger, change the color to text secondary. Cool. Let's duplicate it one more time and add a price tag. Now let's try automatic suggest auto layout feature on all of these. To test this, I'm going to resize it to see if it did a good job. It's kind of responsive, but not completely. So let's fix this. First thing I'm going to do is center align everything and set the gap to 8 between this image and text. We have some useless white space here in the text due to fixed text height. So let's select that and set it to hug contents. This should have an auto gap between them. So let's do that. Oops, it didn't work. Let me see what's wrong. Let's check on the width of each text. This is fine. It's hugging the content. Yep, this text is the problem as it's taking up all the space because of fill container. I just need to set it to hug itself. So let's do that. And there you go. Now it's fully responsive. Let's add some fill background to it and add some corner radius. And I think so a shadow would look nice. So let's add a shadow from our local style like this and add some padding so it looks a bit nicer and spaced out. And let's set the overall height to hug contents, just like this. In the layers, I'm going to call this frame category item card and make it into a component as we're going to need it multiple times. Now, I just need to replace all of these category cards inside these categories frame with our new item card that we just created. Well, I can manually select all of these and replace them with this instance of this component, or what I can do is copy this and then select the parent frame of all these category cards and hit enter on the keyboard to select all the children inside it, and just press Command-Shift-R to replace all of these. The card is overflowing our screen because of the fixed width. So let's set it to fill container, and it's gonna break because on this parent we have this wrap auto layout, and for this to work we have to give it a minimum width. Let's not do that because we just need it to be vertical, so let's change it to vertical auto layout, and now it's fine. Let's test the responsiveness. Yep, everything is perfectly responsive. I think the image on the card is a bit bigger, so let's just reduce the image in the main component and it gets updated everywhere in the instances. We need to update these images in these cards. I have shown you a way to do that already. Let's look at another way. So let's import images and select all of these, and instead of just putting them directly into the cards, let's just click over here on the side to add them onto the canvas. Keep clicking to add all of them until finished. They are too big right now, so let's just actually select all of them, and in the toolbar we can select this scale tool to scale things proportionally, just like this. You can control the scale option from here as well. Select this move tool again to see the fill properties. In the fill, notice that it's showing us that this is an image. Well, we can copy this fill image to other elements as well. To copy this fill, just click over here just next to this fill option. Once it's highlighted, press Command C to copy it. Now I'm going to select this image layer in our component. We can see that we already have an image fill for this. If we paste what we just copied now, it's going to add another fill on top of that. It means that we can have multiple fills. I can now use the visibility toggle to turn on and off any fills that I want. Before I do that, let's copy the fills from other images and paste them over here. Select any image, go to fill, click Command C to copy, select this image again, and Command V to paste. Once done with all of them, we can see that we have 5 image fills now. I can just turn all of the above off and leave the bottom image on for now. Now in our design, if I select this image from our component instance, I can just switch on and off the image that I want and turn off rest of them, just like this. And just repeat this process for other instances of this card. Let's delete these ones because we don't need them anymore. And let's just move this component to our components page. Perfect. Now let's just preview it to see if the scrolling is working. It is working as it should because we fixed it in the previous frame and we just essentially duplicated this frame from the previous one. All good. Now about this navigation bar component, we should also make variants of this where different options are activated. So let's go to the main component, add 3 more variants just like this. Now just activate the nav item we want in each variant. For example, for this variant, I'm going to select this nav item instance, and remember we created properties for this. So let's just set it as unselected, just like this. And for this one, let's set this one as default to make it orange. Just do this for the other variants as well. Let's change the name of the property to status or state. And I'm just gonna change the name of these variants. For example, this one should be called home, this one search, this one orders, and finally this one as account. Let's go to our main page, and in our design, we can switch it to any navigation item that we want, just like this. For now, let's just keep it home. All right, we have come a long way. Now, another feature of Figma is called variables. You can access it right from here. This is an important feature, but this is not completely available in the free plan, and it's not very essential for getting started in Figma. I'm going to create a detailed video about this, so subscribe and stay tuned for that video. So let's talk about Boolean operations now. To understand this feature, let's draw 2 circles like this overlapping each other, and let's call them A and B. Now I can manipulate these shapes using Boolean operations. So select these and you will see this drop down to apply any Boolean operations. We have different Boolean operations that we can apply to the shape like union, subtract, intersect, exclude, and flatten. Let's try union selection. Notice how 2 circles have become one shape, and if I give it a color, it will get applied to it as one shape. And in the layer, if I drop down this union layer, I can see that both our circles are present inside the group. It's not completely destructive. Let's undo and let's try subtract now. What subtract is going to do is it's going to subtract the above layer from the bottom layer. And there you go. We can see that the circle above has been subtracted from the circle below it. And we are left with this moon shape. These Boolean operations can help you create different shapes with ease. Let's undo and try intersect now. And by the name, we can understand that it's going to leave us with only the part that is intersecting in between these both two circles. Quite simple, but very easy to create custom shapes. Let's undo and try exclude operation. This is basically opposite to intersect. It has removed the intersection part and we are left with the sides. Finally, let's undo it and try flatten. Flatten is going to do exactly what union does. It's going to make it into one shape, but it's destructive, which means that it will not have any individual shapes in the layers like we did in union selection. Let's look at an example of how we use Boolean operations in real-time scenarios. Let's say that we need a stop sign. Let's draw a triangle, add some corners to make it into this kind of shape. I don't know what this shape is exactly called. Anyways, now I need a cross on it, so I can just use the line tool to draw a line over here like this. Increase the stroke width to about 10, duplicate it using Command D, and then right click and let's flip it horizontally. And finally, let's just drag it over here to make it look like a cross. Now, if I give this a red color, I can't see through this cross sign. Let's draw a frame to see what's happening. Let's put it inside it. Now, if I change the background of this frame, the cross is still black. It's not a hole that I can see through. So what we can do is select all of these shapes and just subtract them. It's gonna punch a cross-shaped hole in our stop triangle sign. Now, no matter what the background is, it's gonna show through that stop sign. And that's why we use Boolean operations. Let's delete these now as we don't need them. All right, so let's preview this screen. And you know what? We're actually missing the status bar over here. You know, with that time and Wi-Fi signal and battery level, I could design it myself, or we can just go get it from Apple directly. So let's go to Figma community and search iOS. And look, Apple also provides their official Figma design file in Figma community. So let's just open this and let's go into examples. You can explore all the Apple designs over here. We just need the status bar, so we can just zoom into any of these screens and just copy this status bar. And let's go back to our file, select our frame and just paste it in. Now let's just move it on the top. That's weird. Why is this frame overflowing the status bar? Let's see. Oh yeah, it's set to auto. So let's set this one to 0. Now it's fixed. Let's just copy the status bar in this frame as well and get rid of that auto cap in this frame. Let's preview this and have a look at the status bar that we have just added. It's looking nice and beautiful. Let's continue. Do you see how our designs are always presented in this nice iPhone frame? How can we change that? In our file, if we go to the prototype view, this is the device in which these frames will be previewed. We currently have iPhone 16 as we designed the frame sized for iPhone 16. If you have designed different frame sizes, you can choose your preferred device from this list, or you could just select none to ignore the device altogether. Now, when we preview, it's without the frame. And see the black color of this background in the preview, you can change it right from here. Let's do some prototyping now. Basically, these are all static frames right now. I can preview them individually, but there is no interaction. For example, if I click this button, it should take me to some other screen. That's called prototyping. To start the prototyping process, we first have to decide our flow starting point. In our case, this splash screen is going to be our starting flow point. So just select the frame and press this plus icon to add it as starting point. Now you can call this starting point anything. I'm just going to call this start. When I have the frame selected in the prototype settings, we have this interaction option where we can add different kinds of actions. There is another way to add interactions. While we are in this prototyping view, if I select this button and say that I want to add some click interaction to it, I can see these little dots on the edge of this frame. I have these dots on all the sides of the frame. It doesn't matter which you choose. Just click these dots and just drag it to where you want to go when the interaction happens on this button. If I connect this button to this login frame, it automatically is going to add an interaction and it's going to pop up some interaction properties. In the trigger, we can see that it is set to click. We can choose different triggers like on drag, while hovering, while pressing, and even after delay. Let's keep it on click for now because we want to go to this login page when I click this sign in button. In action, we can see that it is set to navigate to. Action is actually what happens when this trigger is triggered. We can also choose actions like change to, which essentially is used to change variants of a component. We have a back action, which takes you back to the frame that you came from. We also have scroll to and open linked actions. We also have some conditional actions, but we don't need to know about them right now because these are related to variables. And finally, we have actions to open, swap, or close overlays. For example, if you wanted to open a screen as a pop-up rather than just navigate to that screen. Play around with these actions to understand how each works. For now, let's just keep it navigate to. In destination, it is already set to login. This happened when we connected the sign in button to the login page. This means is that if I click the sign in button, it will navigate me to the login screen. You can choose any different screen right from here as well, and your arrows will also get updated. In the animation settings, we can set the transition effect of the action. It is currently set to instant, but I can set it to dissolve or smart animate or make it move in or slide in from any specific side. We are not going to explore all of these because it can take up to a whole hour to get deep into this. There are many Figma animation videos on my channel, so check those out and learn about different kinds of animations. Keep it instant animation for now, and in here you can control some settings like reset scroll position and reset component state. Nothing special. Anyways, let's just close this and preview our splash screen. Now this sign in button is clickable, and if I click on it, it takes me to the login page, and that's the basics of prototyping. You can press this restart option here to restart the flow from the starting point again. In our file, if I select this button again, I can adjust the interactions right from here as well. And if you want to add multiple interactions, you can also do that right from here by just pressing this plus icon and just setting the trigger and the actions. But did you notice something? In the preview, when I was hovering this button, it didn't change to the hover variant, although we have created a hover variant for this button. Remember? Well, that's because there is no interaction on those components. So yeah, we can add interactions between these frames, and we can even add interaction between different variants of the components. So for example, if I go to the main component of this instance of button, I can add interaction within the component itself. So if I connect this default variant to this hovered variant, it will add an interaction. The trigger for this I want to be while hovering. And see, the action is set to change to rather than navigate to, because we just need to change the component variant. And now for a smoother animation, it has added a smart animate with a curve of ease out, and the time of animation is 300 ms. You can change the time to anything, but 300 ms is just the sweet spot. Now I want another interaction. While I press this button, I want it to go to pressed variant. Now this time I will not connect the default variant to pressed variant, because when we are about to press this button, it will already be in hovered state. So actually we will connect the hovered variant to the pressed variant just like this. And in the trigger, I will select while pressing. By the way, we have a click interactions that we added earlier in our actual designs. So you cannot add a click interaction inside a component. Otherwise, it just breaks the interaction. And the properties are already set. So let's just close this and test it out. Now look, as I hover, it changes to hovered variant, and as I am pressing it, it is changing to that pressed variant. And if I just click it, it just takes me to the login page. And that's how you add multiple interaction. Let's add similar interaction to our orange button variant. Nothing special, exactly how we did for our other button. And now in the login page, when I click this, I want it to navigate to the home page. Simple and straightforward. I can set interactions on these buttons to navigate to the home screen as well, just like this. Let's test it out now. Hover effect on both of these are working perfectly. Sign in on the splash screen takes us to the login page, and if I click any of these, it takes us to the home screen as well. You can add similar interactions on these inputs as well if you have more variants for this, like a filled-in variant or a hovered variant. What you can't do natively in Figma is make this input typable in prototyping. Anyways, finally, let's add last interaction on this card. What I want is when I click on it, it should take us to the category page. And for this one, let's add a move in animation. Here, I can choose the direction from which I want it to move in. So let's choose left and let's leave the curve ease out with 300 ms animation time. And to go back to the home page, we can connect this home navigation item to this home screen frame. Keep the rest of the settings same, just change the direction from left to right. Let's close this and test it out. By the way, you can preview it right from here as well, and it will preview this in a pop-up rather than a full new tab. Let's navigate to our home page just like this. All working smooth, this category page moves in just like how we want. This home navigation item will take us back to the home screen with a nice animation. Cool. Now let's go in a full preview mode and look at its option. On the top here, we have option to share prototype. Here you can invite people or your clients to look at and test out your prototype. You can copy link or invite people via email directly. And in here, you can control who has access to it. Next, we have some viewing options like if you want to see the design in full width or 100% width and all that. I recommend to keep it to 100% actual size. Here, you can also make it full screen without any interference. This option here toggles the flows. What it means is that you can have multiple flows, like we have a start flow here. We could have like a registration flow or maybe a login flow, and it will show up here. And using this option over here, you can add comments just like this. Comments can be added by you for your clients, or clients can add comments when reviewing your design. If you have any comments, they will show up here. That's it for the preview options. By the way, you can also leave comments in the design file just like this, so that the other designer who might be working on this file with you can look at the comments and make the decisions. Now, when you are done prototyping, these web of arrows can be a bit too much. So you can switch back to the design view just like this, and those will go away. Those arrows are just in prototype view. That means you can switch to design view when you're designing and switch back to prototype view when you need to add some interactions. All right, that was it for prototyping. There is a lot more actually, but you know enough to start doing it yourself. If you have any questions, let me know in the comment section and I will get back to you. Now, at some point, you might want to export certain things out of Figma. To do that, just select that thing. For example, if I want to export this frame, I have this option for export over here. Hit this plus icon. Here I can choose the export file type like PNG, JPG, SVG, or PDF. And here I can control the scale of my export file. 1x means the original frame size as it is designed. Finally, hit this export button to export it and save it to your computer. You can do this for anything you like. So if I select this image and I can click here to set the export options and then hit export, and it will export and download it to my computer. Finally, let's cover our last topic of this tutorial, share file. So you might want other designers to work on your file, or maybe you want to share this with the developers so that they can start building the app. You can just press this share option, and in here you can copy this link or directly invite people via email. And you can also control their access like view or edit. You can copy the link for only the prototype view that we saw in the preview options right from here. You can also publish this project to community from this option, and you can get embed code to embed in some website. Finally, we have this option to copy dev mode link, which is unique for the developers. There is a complete web mode developed just for the developers, which gives them some extra options related to code, and you can turn on this dev mode right from here. This is only available in paid plans, so you don't have to worry about it. Figma auto-saves your project, but in case you want to save a local copy onto your computer, you can go in here, and inside file, you have this option to save local copy, which will save a local copy of Figma file onto your computer, which you can then import into Figma whenever you want, just like you did when you imported my reference Figma file. So that was it. You have mastered all the core concepts of Figma and created your first UI design. I would highly encourage you to continue building on this project, try to create more screens, and implement the concepts that you just learned. Some tips that I would give you as someone who has been working with Figma for so many years is to always try to use auto layouts as much as you can. Think ahead and try to make components out of things that you are going to be using multiple times. This will save you tons of time in the long run. Trust me. If you have any questions, I'm here for you. Please leave your questions in the comment section and I will answer. I will also do an FAQ video after this course, so please subscribe and hit that notification bell. Thank you for watching. See you in the next one.